people can't really. Okay.
Now it's recording.
Okay.
So.
Okay, you can turn it off. The people aren't in here a little bit because I had it in front of me.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Rebecca Pselos. I recently started providing more consulting government relations this year, and that's just leveraging all the knowledge I've had from being in the federal service as a career and then as a political appointee. So I started off my career doing oversight on government acquisitions, and that was through the Government Accountability Office. So I looked at DoD, DHS, NASA acquisitions, even was over at NASA for a while, ended up finishing off my federal career, going over to GSA. I had opportunity to help lead their Congressional Affairs Office. And so I just was really excited to kind of see the other side of acquisitions from that lens, really diving into more of the public policy setting. So with that background, I have been approaching acquisitions to help companies understand the policies that drive what the government's buying and how they're buying. And then also just understanding the acquisition life cycle, so everything that gets planned in. And so by leveraging those two things, I'm hoping to give companies an edge on finding potential opportunities in the future. So that's a little bit about my background and where I am today and how I'm helping companies. I don't know if anybody has a question about that, but feel free to chime in. I'll try to share my experience with anecdotes as I go along. But today, I just really wanted to focus on kind of a few of the federal procurement trends I've seen that are continuing and how that's driving the use of GSA contracts. Hopefully, a lot of you are aware of the value of GSA contracts and just reaching out and having a vehicle for the government to buy off of, but some of you might not. And so that's really what I want to focus on today. And with that, also just kind of going over the differences between a GWAC, which is the government-wide acquisition contract, or schedules. So here's just a quick agenda. I already kind of had dived into that, but we'll kind of end the presentation by talking about the different factors you should be thinking about when you're trying to decide what GSA's contract to go after. So feel free to hold your questions till then if you're more comfortable, or like I said, just kind of dive in when you're ready. So I have 3 trends that I'm going to share, and these are based on more than just spend data. I know a lot of people like to say, oh, GWACs have gotten really popular and all the money that goes into it, but I've also want to tie in kind of the public policy lens. And this I've gotten from engaging with Congress, both from the oversight functions, so going in and asking what reports they want, what acquisitions they want to deep dive onto, and then while I was at GSA, what policies they're hoping to set, change, all of that. Also engaging with the Office of Management and Budget, and so that's including the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, looking at the new pilots that they're trying to push to see if they can meet some of these trends better. And then obviously that's all built on executive orders, budget requests, the congressional budget justifications that go up to the Hill, and then initiatives and programs that are actually in the works. I've also am pairing a lot of the historical context. So acquisitions is a fairly slow moving area. And so I think looking back historically helps you understand where we are today. So the first one here is streamlining and simplifying acquisitions. This is obviously not a new trend at all. We're always looking for ways to get solutions to the end user faster, remove barriers of entry so we can get more contractors, suppliers in. So obviously that's to encourage more competition and to also get better pricing for the government. And then another major component of that is the acquisition workforce is very small. You'll often refer to them as 1102s. It's a very small group of people. They're always needing to hire more. And so how do we let them focus on the high value, high dollar, more complicated procurements? So early actions, it began probably in the early 200s or 2000s. And that was when I started off with Government Accountability Office, looking at acquisitions, and that was strategic sourcing. It went into category management, roughly around like 2014, 2012. And what happened was that OMB found that even though they were making progress, a lot of agencies continued to duplicate procurement efforts and award contracts for similar products over and over again. So there was a lot of efficiency. So they came up with this best in class distinction. So that's the second bullet point here on the slide. And this is really important because this was OMB saying, here's a preferred contract vehicle, and this is the government-wide solution. You really should be using this before going to other contracts. And GSA has a lot of these best-in-class distinctions. And I'll go into more depth as we're talking about the different GWACs. Other recent actions to help streamline, we saw an increase in the micro purchase threshold and the simplified acquisition threshold. Again, that's allowing the acquisition workforce to focus on the higher dollars. So in 2020, we saw the micro purchase go up to 10,000, and that's essentially everything under you can use government purchase card, and it's much more simple acquisition lifecycle process. Not as much planning has to go into, and then also on the contractor side, there's less requirements. Goes up a little bit more to the 250 mark, and then it's full on going after that. We also saw OMB come out with what they called frictionless acquisition, and this was to speed up everything. And so that was, again, looking at leveraging modern buying strategies, just-in-time delivery, getting more access to more innovative solutions. And again, GWACs and schedules kind of comes right up to the forefront when we're talking about these things. I also have to list COVID. I mean, everyone's life's been impacted by that. So here we saw that COVID supercharged the need to go quickly. This was happening while I was at GSA. And the amazing thing was we did it. We made everything go a lot faster. We got waivers for emergencies, addressed under Stafford Act. A lot of it was for natural disasters, not for pandemics. And so we really saw how fast the government could purchase if they wanted to. A few other things I wanted to toss out here is just technology in general. A lot of robotic processing is going on. So Treasury Department's really picking up on this in GSA too. So in sum, I think what you need to be thinking about is what best-in-class vehicle you can be on, which is why you guys are probably here in this presentation today. And then the relationships you can build with the government. So you're going to see that engagement's becoming more critical early on as they're trying to get through that acquisition lifecycle a lot faster. And so the big tip there is I would really encourage you guys to reach out to the agencies you want to work with and engage with their OSBU offices. So that's the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. So they can connect you with people and keep you in the loop on industry days and different other outreach efforts. The second trend here is supporting small business. As you all are aware of, you all serve a very vital role. FY20 had a record-breaking year, and that had followed FY19, which was also record-breaking. At GSA, I really saw the emphasis put on small businesses, and the anecdote there I want to share is AA stars too. So during COVID, GSA increased that contract for a third time in the ceiling because of the participation. 8A stars is a GWAC, so I'll go cover that in a little bit, but it just shows you the dedication that GSA has to small businesses and really thinking about how their contracts are helping you all. And we'll just see this continued emphasis going forward as we're recovering from COVID. I think if any of you had listened to a previous presentation I had done for Hub Zone Council, I think it's very interesting historically. The Small Business Act came out of the war-induced material shortages. We're having supply chain issues now. We've got a lot of concern about difficulty with financial assistance and failure of small businesses. So there's been just a lot of focus on what are we doing to leverage our small businesses. And so Small Business Act, it specifically allows for different contracts to have priority put on small businesses, and that's what the GWACs are leveraging, especially with different pools tailored to different socioeconomic statuses. Priority for Congress, a lot of relief has come out. They're also looking at ways to reduce barriers for small business. So part of that was that micro purchase threshold and a simplified acquisition threshold increase. So that also lessens some of the barriers to entry. Other things that they've done is the mentor protege program. They're talking about rethinking some of the benefits for entrepreneurs, maybe the GI Bill. How can we rethink those benefits? How can we think about student loan and all the other obstacles that young entrepreneurs are coming across? Extra encouragement. In June, SBA announced more assistance in helping businesses understand the federal procurement. Specifically, that was targeted to veterans and service disabled veterans. But we're also seeing statements coming out of the White House where they want to increase the small business goals, especially for disadvantaged businesses. So in June, there was an announcement going from 10% to a goal of 15% of federal contracting to disadvantaged businesses. And then also in August, a lot of legislation was being touted to strengthen the Minority Business Development Agency, and that's based out of Commerce. So you can see there's a lot of things going on. Real quickly, I would couple this also with Made in America efforts. So a bunch of executive orders, again, just reinforcing what we can do here in the US, and a big reliance of that is on small businesses. The third trend here is just getting innovation into the hands of different agencies. This has been on the radar for Congress, for the administration, for agencies for several years, but COVID really highlighted the need to do this fast and to do it well. And then we also have had all the cybersecurity concerns. It seems like every other week you turn on the news and there's another breach of some sort or some concern. So here we've just seen IT become one of the top 5 markets. Most recently, I think it was the FY19 numbers, it was 5.5 billion spent. And it's actually probably higher because IT is a component of almost everything now at this point when you're talking about solutions. We've got all this money going to the capital working funds from CARES Act to help the federal workforce get to remote working. We've got the IT modernization or IT technology modernization fund being stood up even more with a $1 billion increase, and people are thinking about how do we get that out so it's spent, and is there a role for state and local there? So just a lot of discussions on how do we get innovation and emerging technology out. We also just recently saw the announcement of standing up a digital core, so helping with that technology workforce. Some of the emerging tech areas that I helped work on was AI in government, centers of excellence, again, just figuring out how the government needs to use this. So with all this said, you go back to GWACs and Gsa Schedules, and it's how is GSA helping get IT to people? So GSA is one of the category managers that OMB relies on to help guide what contracts should be prioritized. And GSA is the IT category manager. So it would make sense a lot of their GWACs are focused on getting this IT innovation, emerging tech into the hands of agencies. And so in the past 5 years, we've seen a big surge in GWACs to do that. GSA has also recently stood up the IT vendor management office, again, to help with industry outreach and to see what's out there on the horizon for innovation, emerging tech, and how to structure future contracts going forwards. So those are the three trends I just wanted to highlight to lay the groundwork for GSA's contract vehicles. I just wanted to take a quick pause and see if there were any questions. Michelle, if anything's popping up, just let me know.
Nope, we're good right now.
Okay. Okay, so here's just the list of the different acquisition vehicles I wanted to highlight. So GWACs are government-wide acquisition contracts. They are pre-competed multi-award IDIQ contracts that agencies typically use for IT solutions. There are a few others out there for professional services, but a lot of what GSA focuses on and that I had a chance to engage with is on IT. So the growth of these is pretty exponential. If you looked at a chart, it just goes straight up, and hopefully the mirroring on Zoom has me going in the right direction with that. But in 2015, it was 1.3 billion going through. In 2020, 4.3 billion. So that is a 400% increase. Some of the top agencies, DoD, state, and DHS. So a lot of times you may think, oh, it's a GSA contract. I really want to work with DHS. Well, GSA does a lot of procurement for a lot of other agencies, and it's not just civilian. They do a lot for DoD too. The other really important thing about GWACs, so going back to that trend of streamlining, is OMB's push for people to use these type of contracts. So just quick little history lesson. In 2008, OMB said that GSA's GWACs are in the best interest of the government. A few years later, in 2011, OMB asked the agencies to look at GWACs for efficiencies and cost savings. So they saw a lot of value there. In 2012, GSA even saw that, and they said for all our internal buying, we are going to put a preference on the GWACs. That was then followed by DoD making the same statement, encouraging the use of GSA GWACs, and then DHS followed suit too. So this is really popular in the sense that it's a marketing tool in itself. If you're a contract holder, to be on a GWAC and somebody asks, oh, how can I buy your product? And you mention your GWAC name, they're like, oh, okay, I got that. This is going to make my life more simple. GSA Schedules is another option a lot of people will do to work with the government. It's a long-term government-wide contract. And this is really important to highlight because you can have up to 20 years with your contract, which is a very long time. And then you would just apply for another follow-on contract if you're in good standing. So you could run on GSA schedules for a long time. These can be done as IDIQs. So that's indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. You can do blank purchase agreements off of these. And essentially it allows agencies to access more than 11 million products and services. So if you name it, you can probably find it on their catalog. The other wonderful thing about this is you get access to more than just the US federal government customer. So state and local governments and law enforcement under certain categories can also use this contract schedules. And so this was one of the things that we would engage a lot with different states, especially New York, when I was in the Congressional Affairs Office, of just letting them know that they could buy off of our schedules and benefit from that federal discount. Obviously, you'd want to clear the eligibility. I know during COVID, we had some questions about what hospitals could buy, and it came down to how they were funded. But GSA can help you with that through their Office of Government Policy, and they'll help those people understand whether they can buy or not. But once you're on and you can tout that, you can also be working with people in your state. So that's a great thing to know. I also wanted to highlight assisted acquisitions. This is a little off topic for today, but something I'm really impressed with GSA, and I just wanted to put it out there as a nugget. So this is kind of a white glove approach. So when there's a complicated acquisition out there and they don't really know how to buy it, an agency can call up GSA and ask for help, and they pay a very small fee, and they get all this expert knowledge. So if you've got something that maybe R&D, you're doing SIBR, and you come to phase 3 and you really want to figure out how to commercialize it, like, this is a great place, a great resource is GSA to figure out how to get it into the hands of customer agencies. So I'll just stop there with kind of the overview. Obviously, there's pilots in different programs. I had worked on the e-commerce platform, so if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out and ask those questions too. So I just wanted to go back over just how GSA supports the trends now that you know what the contract general names are. And this is essentially how you would market your contract. So GWACs and schedules allow agencies to buy quicker. This is great as we get towards the end of the fiscal year. They don't have to set up a new contract. They know that they can do it quickly. These also prioritize for small businesses. I'll get into that in a few minutes about how that works for GWACs and schedules. And then it also provides multiple approaches for getting to emerging technology. So this is always on the radar for any agency that's looking at buying new technology. GSA also pays a lot of attention to small businesses. I was very impressed with how much thought went into small businesses as they were planning. And because of that, they also have merged it with a lot of other roles that they have. So they're one of the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council members, which sets a policy for acquisitions. So it's GSA, DOD, and DHS. So they really do think about small businesses as they're thinking about how policy gets implemented. Like I said, they're the IT category manager. And they also serve the role as a Federal Acquisition Security Council member. So as we get into supply chain issues, security, this is another role where they're wearing a hat and they're figuring out how all this policy and how their acquisition vehicles are making sure they're getting the right vendors. So when the customer agencies, the federal agencies come, they have confidence that they're working with vendors that they're supposed to be working with, that are approved and are going to meet all the requirements. So they're good to go as long as they can meet the needs the agency has and within the price that's appropriate, they're good to go. Okay, so the first GWAC I wanted to go over is Oasis. So typically you'll just hear it referred to as Oasis in general conversation, but it's actually 7 separate contracts. You've got the first one being unrestricted, so that's open to any business size distinction. Then you have small business, and then you have the AA pools. The nice thing about this is by the pools, they will send out requests for bids essentially at the task order level, and that's what the competition is limited to. So if they want to send out to the 8A pools, you're only competing with the other 8A contract holders in that pool. You do not compete with the rest of every other potential government contractor out there. So what you see posted to these contracts for requests for bids will not be posted on SAM.gov. So that's part of the attractiveness of being on a GWAC is you've already limited your competition. About 75% of the task orders are going to Oasis small business on here, and about half the dollars are going to Oasis small business. So that's the second sub bullet there. There is ability to do direct task orders, and that would be up to the customer agency. So that would be your client, or GSA refers to customer agencies as the agencies using their contracts. This connects federal agencies to a lot of different services. So we've got program management, management consulting, logistics, engineer, scientific, financial services. And this is really great if an agency has very complex requirements and they need to figure out, how do I go out? How can I get bids that can do a lot of different services? So this is for things that are a little bit more complex than what you would find on GSA schedule going out. Task orders can be awarded through 2024 on Oasis, and the actual period of performance on those could go out to 2029. There is no ceiling on here. Some of the other GWACs do have ceilings. This one does not. And it supports all contract types. So you can do fixed price, cost reimbursable, and so forth. And if you have questions about that, I can go into kind of why the government would do one or the other, but you guys may know that. So just chime in if you have any questions about what I'm bringing up. The last bullet on here references Big Mac. So a lot of puns have been made on that as Big Mac, McDonald's Big Mac, but it's Big Mac, best in class there. And they've been saying that the RFP would come out sometime this fall. I doubt that that's going to happen. Polaris is probably up next and should be a focus. And Big Mac is going to be a really large contract. And so a lot of thought has to go into that. So I just wanted to share a little bit about Big Mac so it's on your radar. So this is potentially going to combine the next round of Oasis contracts along with HCATS, and that's a GWAC for human capital and training solutions. So think about HR consulting, training development, all that, that's right now under HCATs. So BICMAC may and probably will combine all that, and they'll also combine the building maintenance and operations. So it's going to be this massive contract that people can come to. So data shows that for those 3 contracts, it's about $33.6 billion. And just looking at the success of Oasis driving half that money to small businesses and in 75% of the task orders, small businesses should be really excited for this opportunity. The other interesting thing about BICMAC is that they've been talking about doing open enrollment. So you don't have to be right off the bat a contract holder. You could do it essentially like you can with schedules and apply to be considered as you are ready. So I'll get more into kind of the benefits of that with GSA schedules. But this, I believe, would be one of the first GWACs that would have that open enrollment. Some GWACs do allow cohorts to come on as needed, especially for like AA, where businesses start graduating and they need kind of a new refresh of cohorts. Okay, the next contract is Polaris, and this has gotten a lot of attention this year because this is what's up for the new round. And this is intended to improve defense and civilian agencies' access to small businesses, IT service providers. This placing Alliant. Alliant 2 never really got off the ground for a variety of reasons, but you'll see the potential expected ceiling on Polaris is 15 billion, and that's just reflecting that previous GWAC of Alliant. And then the 10-year period of performance, that's also going off of here. The interesting thing about Polaris is they're really thinking about how to get more of the emerging technology. And they've also thought about some of the socioeconomic businesses that haven't been represented, and especially hub zones. So you guys, and so just kind of going through this, the IT solutions that they're looking for are going to be like artificial intelligence, automated technologies, blockchain, cloud services, cybersecurity, edge computing. So all these things that have been very interesting and on everyone's minds, this is going to be the GWAC that gets that in. They're going to be leveraging also some authority that was given to them in the FY19 National Defense Authorization Act. And this is going to allow them to award the GWAC without evaluating the pricing at the high contract level. So typically when you would put in your proposal, you would have a general, this is my price, and then that gets negotiated yet again at the task order level, and that's really the price you get. So this authority says, you know, that's a lot of work to do it at the contract level when you're just really truly going to do it at the task order level. And so maybe we don't have to do it right at the beginning. And so this this contract Polaris is going to figure out how to do it. It's a good test. Everyone's really excited, and they're going to do that through self-score. So if you were to go on GSA's Interact page, you can find a draft of the scorecard and kind of see where you stack up, and you can run through that. So if you're not seeing a lot on pricing, the things that are going to matter here is past performance, what type of agencies you've worked with, the size, what type of technology you're looking at. So just a wide variety, kind of what certifications you have. I think I believe there's a CMA section. So thinking about what type of level of information you're processing, all that. So very exciting. They've been talking about fall 2021. It's the end of the fiscal year. Everyone's really busy. So I would not to come out until probably November, October at the earliest. A lot of times they like to release contracts around a holiday weekend, just to give all the federal staff that's been working on it a little bit of a breather before all the proposals start coming in. So I would probably imagine by the end of this year, but kind of looking for when it quiets down for the federal government. 8A stars 3. So 3 being that this is on the 3rd iteration. So they made these awards this summer for the third one. This is small business set aside GWAC focused on 8A. The period of performance is a little bit shorter on this one just because there's been so much success with graduating. We know that these businesses are going to graduate. And so this is just up to 8 years. So that initial period is 5 years for your base. And then there's an option year of 3 years for a total of 8. The other exciting thing about 8A, because it has been so successful, it got increased to 50 million. So because it has been so successful, it also in July got the distinction of best in class. So if you remember what I was talking about earlier with OMB trying to streamline and push people to best in class contracts, this is the latest GWAC that has gotten that distinction. And so just a lot of popularity. Agencies that know that they need to support their small business goaling, this is another way that they can say, oh, here, I can meet my AA goaling. It's a best in class. And so you've got that extra built-in marketing. And then just to give you an idea of kind of why agencies also like GWACs. So for example, this one, there's a 0.75% fee for GSA to run it. And that's what the agencies pay on it. And so they're paying GSA for their expertise, standing something up, and they're not having to bog down their acquisition workforce. So it's a very, very good deal for them. It's a very small price. And so that's just kind of how that works. So in case anyone was wondering why GSA does this for everyone, it's part of their mission. And then they also get a small fee off of that to help with all their staffing and their resources. On here, again, they've divided out into constellation and functional area. Constellation is more the pools of the vendors, so how they're classifying the vendors themselves. And then functional area is the services that they're providing. So again, this is limiting your competition down to the pool of people that you've been awarded with. So that's why it's really attractive. Vets too. Again, this is another GWAC. This is a little bit smaller. So we just came off of STARS that I talked about. That was 50 billion. This is just 5 billion. This is really focused on service disabled, veteran owned small businesses. So kind of to go through the loop. Like I said, Polaris is targeting women owned small businesses in hub zone because there hadn't been a GWAC specifically for them with pools. As you can see, there was one for AA. And there is one for service disabled veteran owned businesses. So that's also why Polaris is getting to be so exciting for businesses, and especially for you guys that are affiliated with the Hub Zone Council. I would say on vets, if this is something you want to consider for the future, you had to do your certifications through the VA. It is now going over to SBA to certify for that veteran owned service disabled related. So just kind of keeping in mind, SBA is taking over a lot more of the certifications. And so if that's something you're interested in, I would suggest just go ahead and get that certification going, because you don't know what the bottlenecking will be like when it comes up for a recompete. Obviously, this is ending in, far out, a couple of years from now. But it never hurts if this is on your radar to think about, are you certified? So getting on a GWAC, obviously you want to be monitoring all the RFPs, updates. So that's draft, all the industry days. So you can do this by going to GSA's Interact page and just signing up for all the blog updates. That's usually where they post it first. They'll also, for Polaris specifically, they have FAQs, they have links to the scorecard, the draft scorecard, all that. Again, I have the dates here posted, and this is the latest that they have on GSA Interact fall 2021. Obviously that's slipping, and that's not surprising. That's very typical. For Polaris and most GWACs, you'll want to have all your small business status certifications completed. For Polaris, that's going to fall under the NAICS code for computer systems design services, and that's a small business size standard of 30 million. So that's just kind of an idea of where you're falling for that. And I'm sure Michelle can help you or point you in the right direction for any of the other certifications. I know that she's had a plethora of really good presenters covering all sorts of topics. But some of the other things you want to think about is teaming arrangements for GWACs. So under Polaris, since there are 3 pools, small business as one, woman-owned, and then hub zone, you could team up with somebody. You could do a joint venture, you could do a mentor protege, and you could actually apply to all 3 of those pools. So if you can qualify for hub zone on your own, that's great. If you're a woman-owned small business and a hub zone, you could do both. If you want to have that bigger small business distinction, you could team up with somebody where that affiliation counts and keeps you in the small business category. So people are thinking of a lot of different ways to team for Polaris. And part of that goes back to the scoring. So if you're not competing on price, you're really looking at past performance. Maybe you're a small business and you need a team with somebody so you have a higher self-scoring rating for past performance. Maybe you need somebody that's done work for a larger agency, a larger dollar threshold. So a lot of people have been figuring out how to leverage that, both for bandwidth and whatnot. Teaming also comes in really nicely if there's a GWAC that you missed when they first released and first awarded. You can always go find somebody and be a sub to them and partner in different ways. So maybe that vets contract is really exciting to you and you don't want to wait for the next round. You can go and see who's already listed there and see if there's a teaming arrangement that works well for you. And that's usually done kind of in that prime and subcontractor process. GSA schedule. So kind of switching gears. So I think that covered a lot for GWACs. I'll just pause and see if there's any questions about GWACs before I jump into schedules.
I did have one question. I've been getting a lot of questions about like the teaming arrangements and how Polaris was kind of contradicting how past performance was being viewed in comparison to like new rules that came out with SBA. Were you tracking any of that? Because I know I was getting a lot of emails from people.
Yeah,
say a lot was over my head.
They released some more FAQs. I want to say like 2 weeks ago. My timetable is like totally screwy with COVID. I'm like, oh, when was this? What month is this? But I believe it was a couple weeks ago because I had flagged for one of my clients that it came out. And so essentially, the questions are all over the board of like what counts, what doesn't count, how can you do both? Can you do both? And part of what they're coming out and saying is if you're like looking at different pools, some of your past performance can only account for one area. So like you couldn't essentially like be a joint venture and apply for all 3 categories and use the same thing. They're kind of breaking it down to like by entity for each division. So you could on your own do hub zone and then as like a teaming arrangement go for the small business. And that's where a lot of the confusion was because they were saying, well, you can only count past performance a certain way. And people were like, well, I've got 2 entities that are kind of sharing past performance. So how does that work? So GSA knows that that's very confusing. They put out some FAQs. I would say I would reach out to the OSBU office and just straight up ask your questions and get it direct from the horse's mouth about how they're wanting to do that. It also helps them understand where the points of confusion are. But yes, Michelle, you're right. It was very confusing because they're trying to allow people to be in each pool, but they also don't want to then create these humongous pools of everyone. You have to have some distinction between those pools. So
to be clear, they weren't saying, hey, people cannot like the past, because everybody was freaking out because they're saying, oh, they're saying we can't use our primes past performance or we can't do this. And I'm like, I don't feel like that was what's being said. Like if they were in a prime, like a mentor protege relationship and they were submitting as the mentor protege agreement, was there any, or was that person way off basis when they were sending me those emails?
So it had, that I would want to talk more specifically about that because there is some limitation there, because you still have to have the small business, which is probably the protege, be able to do it. And that's really where the concern was to make sure that you weren't overly reliant on a prime or your mentor for that past performance.
But was the language relatively consistent with how SBA had it written? Because people were giving me the indication that it was kind of contradictory to the SBA guidance.
Yeah, and SBA helped clear up that guidance too. So this has kind of been a moving wicket. So depending on when those questions are coming through, I think I would want to just kind of talk with that business or point them directly back to GSA to see like when that point of confusion was and if what they've released in the past month or so has helped clarify that. But it was confusing because what they were trying to do was let you be in as many pools as possible, but then they also didn't want everyone being in every pool and defeating the purpose of having 3 different pools. And so that's kind of like essentially where some of that confusion was coming from, and then lining it up to policy because the mentor protege program is fairly new. So how does that actually work?
Well, that actually, that makes sense. So thank you for clarifying that in like terms that I could actually understand. I appreciate it.
So you're not alone in being confused. That has been a big source of confusion for a lot of people. And I would just say, reach out to someone with your specific details. If you're listening to this webinar and that's some of your questions. I do know that the mentor protege program has been trying to get people through really, really fast. So if you're still on that process of working through that program in order to be on Polaris, I think you still have time. It's getting a little short because that RFP will come out soon. But I know that, yes, this has been a moving target and probably one of the biggest challenges for Polaris. And Michelle, if you want to follow up, I'm happy to track down.
I will, and I think that it was more so like, to be perfectly honest, I've been so swamped lately, and when people send me these questions, sometimes they forget that if you're not really working it and you're not really familiar with and tracking all the changes, it's kind of like French to me. And I'm like, I need more information than that. So it's second nature to them because everybody's been so engulfed and it's been at the top of but I'm not an expert in this arena. So this is the reason why I have people like you in my life, because you're obviously much more on top of it. So even my question probably didn't make much sense, but I feel like a lot more comfortable now based on your response.
And even one of the companies I'm helping out with, I mean, I think we met 3 times just to kind of go over this because it is a new process, right? And so there's always questions and how you do this. But I reiterate, like if you have GWAC questions and you're interested in GWACs, go to GSA's Interact page. It's essentially a blog and you can sign up for the listserv so you get updates all the time. But that's where they post everything. And then really use those industry days. GSA takes those very seriously. They keep all the comments. They go through them internally, they're sharing them. So like speak up. GSA does listen. I would have to say that they do really think about what feedback they're getting in.
I agree. They even have business development specialists, which I did not know was a thing. Like they literally have people that are there to help you like one-on-one, not an OSTBU, an actual business development specialist. I'm like, what? How would I not know this?
SBA has a similar things too. They have programs where you can go in and have advisors, and they're run all across the US. So there's a lot of resources out there. And then obviously I'm happy to also chit chat and see like kind of where you need help. And if that's something I can help connect the dots, because there are a lot of moving parts to all of this. So that's just wrapping your head around the contract and how to like put in a submittal. But then it's like, once you're on contract, how do you then market, or how do you think about the next opportunity down the road? So lots of moving pieces and a lot of things for people to connect when you're just busy running your own business. So I don't know how you all do it, running your own business and figuring this out. So I just help from a high level.
Well, you're doing good. The fact that, the last time I saw you go, this was my first presentation. I feel like you've done a lot in between because you're getting really good at this.
Yeah, okay. Well, if there's any other GWAC questions, I can answer them, or I can just dive into schedules real quick. I know that you guys had another GSA schedules presentation, so I'm not too worried if we kind of run over on time, because I wasn't going to go a ton into details, but I just want to let people know kind of what the big differences are.
No, I mean, I don't think that we have questions right now. I'm not promising you that I'm not going to have questions here in a few moments as you get through here, though. So,
Okay. So GSA schedules, again, this is a prioritized contract. So this is the federal acquisition regulations. You can actually go into the regulations and see them saying that this is where you should be going first. Historically, it was 24 schedules, and that's why you see it referred to as plural. But recently they just consolidated it into one. And that again is following one of the procurement trends of streamlining. So they said, why are you contractors having to make a submittal for every single type of schedule? Let's do one basic submittal, and then you just have to add in onto that the different requirements for the different category schedules that you have. So it's one single schedule solicitation now with a simplified format, streamlined terms and conditions, and then it just is tweaked a little bit with the categories, subcategories, and then the special items numbers. Like I said earlier, all agencies can use schedules, and then you do have some state and local government, tribal governments, educational institutions that can purchase off of this. So again, another great marketing tool for some of the local business in your area at the state level, and really just like elevating your name. This is great. If you are in those categories where you can buy, you can, offer a little bit more back to your community, which I know HubZone's all about, kind of developing from that local stance. So more than 11 million commercial supplies and services. Again, if you're not really doing services, you're not really looking then at GWACs, you're just looking at schedules. But if you're doing services, you could be on both GSA schedules and a GWAC. I've seen that one of the companies I'm helping out does training curriculum, and the agencies that we've been talking with, they do purchase off both a GWAC and schedules along with some other different vehicles. 36.6 billion in sales in FY20, with just a little bit less than 40% going to small businesses. As a hub zone and any socioeconomic disadvantaged business, the nice thing about schedules is if your agency customer or any agency wants to go and hit one of their small business goals, they can go into GSA schedules on their back end and say, I want to award this work to an 8A. And they will click that, and then an alert will go out through GSA eBuy and to all the 8As in that category and allow them to bid. So this is a great tool, and I think we'll see a lot more use of schedules as there's more and more pressure to meet small business goals and to use more of the hub zone businesses, because this is just a very simple way for an agency to check the box and get that in. On the flip side, good marketing tool for you all. If you really want to say, hey, I'm a hub zone, I know that there's a goaling. I see that your agency is at X percentage, or historically they've kind of been under. Here's a great way to up that. And this is also why you would want to get an OSBU group involved. So that again is the Office of Small Disadvantaged Small Business Utilization, because they can kind of point agencies to this option to help them with their goaling. The other nice thing about this is vendors can come on at any time. So when you're ready, you can apply. And this is just to keep competition strong and then also get the newest technology in. So remember with GWACs, I was talking about, sometimes the technology had gotten stale, and that's why Polaris is so exciting, because you're getting in the new technology categories. But kind of up until now, the only way to kind of get that new technology was to turn to schedules or have an agency stand up their own contract. I think that's kind of just like an overview for your understanding. The last bullet point here just iterates that all the opportunities under schedules, they don't get posted publicly. They're just done through that eBuy platform. So as a schedules holder, you get that. One of the newer things that Schedules has done that I just realized within the past week or so of talking to GSA is that they did an agreement with DLA, so the Defense Logistics Agency. So DLA likes to use GSA's global supply program, and that allows defense agencies to buy directly from another agency, in this case, GSA. So that's all requisition process. What GSA does is they then turn around and they say, oh, all our schedules holders, we love you. We're gonna see if anyone can meet this need. GSA buys it, and then GSA hands it over to the agency that needs it. So they signed an agreement with DLA to help kind of foster that process. So you're also getting an inside scoop into some of the DLA procurements as a schedules holder. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And that was the first I had heard about it. Didn't even hear about it while I was at GSA. It was after the fact when I was chatting with someone. So becoming a GSA schedule holder, you really need to research whether this is the right solution for you. Just with anything else, there is a minimum sales requirement. So you want to do some of your market research to make sure once you're on schedules that you can go find business. That threshold is $25,000 annually. There's an exception for the first 2 years. You get 2 years to hit that 25. But essentially, they want to make sure that all the vendors on GSA schedules are able to deliver, are delivering, that they are the best vendors. So when an agency comes to GSA schedules, they're happy, customer satisfaction there. If people aren't happy, they're not going to come back and reuse GSA schedules. I have heard of instances where people have been kicked off GSA schedules because they're not responsive. So not only once you're a schedule holder, do you have to worry about that, but you also need to really think about how are you monitoring all the alerts that are coming out and being responsive to any bids that go out. It's also just important to be responsive anyways. I've told people this before. If you can't, for some reason, bid on a task order, maybe you don't have the bandwidth, you're already really busy, go ahead and say, this is something I could do, I just can't do it now. That way those agencies know that they can come back and look for a hub zone again. It just happened to not work out that time, but you don't want them all of a sudden saying, there's no point in doing a directed task order to a hub zone. Let's just do open within schedules. So just make sure that you're monitoring that and you're fostering that relationship. And so again, that's all through eBuy. So once you're a schedule holder, you have access to that. IT companies, your past performance, there's a little bit more wiggle room here. You can rely on some of the experience and certifications of your employees. Everyone else, it's really past performance. You can look at past performance, other government buys. You can look at past performance if you're doing state and local, any other contracts you've had before. So that's just kind of in a nutshell, things to think about and whatnot. You will spend a lot of time with your contracting officer negotiating for discounts after your proposal goes in. So expect some back and forth to get there. And it just kind of all depends on how thorough your application is for the timelines. It could take 6 to 8 months. I think GSA says it takes about $100,000 or so to kind of invest in becoming a schedule holder. And that's just because you're going through all your paperwork. It's a lot of time and resources up front to make sure you have everything in place. And then you're pretty much good to go. And then you're managing from that point forward. So just kind of to recap what contracts you should be on. I will say you don't have to be on just one. If you want to be on multiple ones and it makes sense for you, you can. So, if you want to do Polaris and then you want to do BICMAC, which is that next iteration of Oasis in the future, you can. You can also be on schedules. That's really what your bandwidth is. And then how you're going to stay on top of monitoring when agencies come out with requests for bids. Services provided, that's obviously going to influence this a lot. Obviously products, schedules, services, IT, you have a few more GSA GWACs to think about. When your services can be delivered, are you just wanting kind of smaller buys? That's going to be more schedules for the time being. schedules tend to have a smaller dollar value to the task orders. If you go to some of the other GWACs, those are much, much larger. Again, previous past performance with the government. So past performance threshold for schedules, it's a lot lower than, let's say, Polaris, where that's going to be a major part of your scoring. Small business certifications. Obviously, you want to target pools where you are eligible so you can narrow down your competition. And then doing some research about your potential customers. So just understanding what contracts they use. So like I said earlier, my example with the company that's working on training curriculum, we know that a handful of our folks use both HCATs and schedules. And so because schedules is open enrollment, we'll probably target to get them on that first, and then keep an eye out for Big Mac when HCATs rolls over into that. And then participation in SBIR and STR. So R&D, remember, if you have been doing R&D, you've got sole source for that phase 3. And so maybe these really aren't the contracts you want because you are competing within the pools. Maybe you want to go to GSA assisted acquisitions and say, hey, we need something special for us. We've got this extra benefit of going through the SBIR program that we can be sole source and we don't have to have competition. And then finally, pricing of services. You definitely want to take a look at the GSA e-catalog. That will tell you kind of the basic pricing that people are putting on schedules. Obviously, those can all be negotiated down, just as with any of the GSA contracts, but it'll give you a good starting point. And then, you know, thinking about in general, are you competing at a higher level? Do you want to be on a GWAC? And then consider teaming arrangements. So you can do teaming arrangements within schedules. So maybe you are small and that's just where you want to bite off, but you want to get ready and prepare for a bigger GWAC. You can look at other schedule holders in the same area and say, hey, let's work together and we can bid on big work. And so maybe that's expanding your bandwidth in the same services, or maybe it's looking for where you can augment and go after some of the work that's coming out. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. I'll ping Michelle because I know Michelle always has questions.
Yeah, I do, but if they're not going to ask questions, I did want you to elaborate a little bit further. You were talking about with like past performance. It's very important that you make sure you have past performance. Do you got any maybe tips or tricks on strategies that companies can do if they're about to get off-ramped off of a schedule, or is it a big deal if they get off-ramped? I think I already know the answer. It's probably not the greatest thing, but
it's not the greatest thing to get off-ramped from schedules. And there's probably multiple reasons there. So one is you need to bring in business. So I like to think of schedules as a fishing license. So just because you have a fishing license doesn't mean you're going to catch a whole lot of fish, right? Like I'm horrible at fishing. I will go stand there with a fishing line. I have my fishing license, but I really don't know what bait to put on the line or what time of the day I should be going. It's just an escape for my family. So that's just the same thing with schedules too. You have to work it. And if you're getting off-ramped, it's most likely because you aren't bringing in that minimum. So past performance isn't really going to help you there on that. And then also if you get some negative scoring from other people, when you are in all these things, everyone can check on your past performance, and that may be a deterrent to giving you work. And so that just kind of feeds into the fact then that you can't keep up your minimum sales on schedules. So that's kind of the off-ramping. And then I think, Michelle, you kind of just in general, like strategies for past performance. So kind of on the flip side, if you're getting into government contracting, strategies there for past performance. I would look at the micro purchase threshold and all the advantages that gives you up to the $10,000 mark. So you don't need a contract if you're buying under that threshold. You can use a government purchase card, and you don't have to go into a competition about like, is your past performance better than everyone else? It's much, much easier to make the justification. It's essentially a reasonable check that your prices are reasonable and that you appear to be offering in good faith. And so you can get little buys like that to start building up your past performance. You can also be a sub to a prime. That counts as past performance. So you don't have to be a contract holder, but you can work with someone and slowly build up that past performance. So then you are ready to compete on a schedule, and then you keep growing. So I think that's kind of both the front end and then kind of end of life with past performance.
So if a company is on a schedule and they're about to be off ramped and they're looking at opportunities, maybe they've, submitted bids and they were being unsuccessful, are they allowed to partner with companies that aren't on the schedule in order to increase their competitive advantage to win those awards? Like, is that a good strategy? Or is there any issue with like it? Because obviously if two small businesses partner, they're still small.
Yeah. So to partner at that level, you would want to partner with somebody else that's already on GSA schedules. You could bring somebody in as a sub. You could say, like, this is my strategy. I'm going to augment my workforce. My past performance issues have been, I just didn't have a big enough workforce and I need to bring people in, and I'm going to do that by using a sub.
Okay. So,
but teaming, like straight up a teaming arrangement, you would want to go to somebody else that's already on schedules.
okay. Well, that answers that. Wait, there was another question I had, and of course it just, I hate when that does it, when it's on the tip of your tongue and then you forget. So, oh man.
That's fine. You keep
I'll
thinking
let you
about
go to that slide. It might come back to me.
Yeah, I just put this up just for the remainder of the time since we're already at 2:00. These are just some websites, so I just wanted them up so people could take a screenshot or jot them down. But these are different things you can go to for market research. So market research, eLibrary, and GSA Advantage. SAM, obviously, those are much broader announcements, but they do feed into the historical bias, so you can see where people are going and what contracts. But like I said, for GWACs and schedules, all of those things are going to be posted for work. It's going to be posted within those contracts, not on SAM.gov. So that's why GSA eBuy is on here. I also have the dashboard for GWACs. You can see spending. And then if you're interested in more of the public policy side, whitehouse.gov is where you find the executive orders, and then congress.gov, you can see kind of the legislation, draft legislation that's popping up. So maybe Michelle's had the question pop back into her head.
Well, I forgot that other one, but I did have another one. Have you worked anything with, like, because GSA schedules are also adopted on the state level. Do you have experience working on that level? Because actually one of our GSA reps was talking about how we could expand that effort. And I'll forward you the email, because now that I'm thinking of it, I realized you were definitely somebody I should have on it. Well, I don't know. Lizzie might have already forwarded it to you because I sent it to her. But
I don't think I saw that. But yes, with COVID, that was definitely something we looked at. So in general, there's schedules is one of those things where state and local can come and purchase off of. And so there's a category for protective apparel, I believe. And so like PPE falls under that. So you could do that. Up until that point, obviously, COVID kind of showed this spotlight on things that we needed that we didn't think we needed. Schedules was used a lot for disaster relief. And so if you think about people coming in after a hurricane and they need, comms, like walkie-talkies, and that's probably data technology, but you get the general gist. Tents, anything that they needed as a products and supplies to help with that recovery, and then also services. So, a state could then come buy some services that would help support that. And so that's really where a lot of the spending has gone. Now that we're seeing a lot of money pass from the federal level down to the state level, I think there's been a lot more attention GSA wide on offering things to state and local at a good price. And so I think leveraging GSA schedules is the easiest way to do that. Otherwise, you get into a little bit of a complicated interstate commerce issues. But yes, I have, and long story short, yes, I've seen GSA schedules used. I think a good way to kind of approach that, if that's something you want to expand, we did a lot of sessions with local congressional staff. So think about like I obviously live close to DC, so there's a big distinction there. But let's say you lived in, let's say, Illinois. So you would go to the Illinois office of your congressional member, maybe your representative, and say, hey, I'm a company, I provide these things, I'm on GSA schedules, I know that state and local can buy off of it. I'd love to kind of tell you a little bit more about that, or you could point them back to GSA, and then GSA has a whole presentation and they can go into like, here's other ways you can help your constituents and drive business here. So there's a lot, there's some strategy behind it, but you can definitely team up with GSA and kind of get the word out. So I don't know, Michelle, if you have any follow-ups.
With one stone, I'm like literally forwarding that email to you as I speak. Like, so I don't forget, like it's up on my computer. I was like, oh yeah, 2 birds. All right. So, all right. We are getting close to the end of the time here. And so we're going to give you one more opportunity. Does anybody have any other questions? Because
I would just love to like hear like where you are and what like services you are. I'm always kind of curious to learn a little bit about like who's interested in hearing about GSA. So I don't know if any of you aren't shy. It's a Friday.
Do you guys want to post into the chat what kind of companies that you are? Are you listening to me, guys? Hey, Ollie oxen free.
I'll follow up with Michelle. She can give me.
It's okay. I have their contact information. Actually, some of them I do know that are in here.
I'm always curious. Like doing my own consulting and everything. Like it does take really special people to be brave enough to go out and do it. So I'm always just curious to see who's out there and what they're focusing on, and just hearing.
I'm not that brave person. There's a lot of times people call me and they're like, oh, but I need help with my schedule. Can you help with that? I'm like, no. Not at all. Like, do not have the patience for any of that, because it is very involved. And there's a lot of nuances, and it takes a special kind of person to help the people that are going after GSA schedules. So thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah. And I think GSA is an amazing agency. I was really lucky to work with them. I think their heart's in the right place, really supporting small business and getting the best value for the customer, which is the federal agencies. So
wow,
I can help
that for them. They'll love that.
Yeah, anything I can help to just help with those synergies, feel free to just like ping me. Just general questions. I'm happy to help out how I can. So,
one last question, and this is completely off topic. Mm-hmm. So GSA is the leader in developing the innovation technology, streamlining processes and everything. And then poor SBA over here, who's supposed to be helping small businesses and doing all this, is dealing with antiquated technology that's literally from the 90s. Yeah. And so they give them a budget to develop new technology, but you're giving an organization that is not focused on developing innovation and technology a task to develop said technology. Why has there just never been a task force that partners GSA with SBA to develop a centralized processing tool that is used for small businesses, instead of telling SBA, like, here, you guys go figure it out? Like, yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, I go on. So a lot of the challenge with government technology is the resources. One of the unfortunate things is our government's so based on legacy systems, and it takes so much money to keep those legacy systems running, because all the people that used to know that system have slowly retired or found better jobs or done something else. And so it's a smaller and smaller pool of people. It's just like fixing an escalator. To fix an escalator is very expensive because there's very few people that know how to do it, because people don't put escalators in it anymore. And so there's always this demand on resources to keep the system up and running. And at the same time, you need to have more money to buy a new system and to migrate and to do all that. And so a lot of times agencies get stuck in this place where they know they need something, but they don't have the resources to go out and get the solution and to purchase it the way that they need to. So the task force, that's great to share ideas. There's lots of community practices. There's lots of conversations back and forth. GSA, through their centers of excellences, they help agencies understand how they can leverage technology. So people can sign up lots of different paths, but the biggest challenge is just getting the resources in place. I mentioned early on in the presentation, there's a technology modernization fund, and the goal of that fund was to help agencies get new systems. So address those antiquated systems, bring in something more beneficial. There's always been this need to repay back money you get out of the fund. And the likelihood is if you save money, you're not going to see it in your budget for the next year, or at least not where you need to. So there was always a question of, that's great, we have money, but how will we pay it back? So there's been a lot of conversation about how we can look at the TMF fund and kind of free up. So big, long conversation, but yes, there's lots of people with great ideas. It comes down to the cost of implementing it and kind of that program management side. So I hear your pain. There's so many, like, just, you look at OPM, leaving the federal government, you look at, the IRS and like how some of the things are being processed, and you're like, all these companies have this great technology. And so the hope is these GWACs, make that technology a little bit more accessible. It helps with that planning. And so once you know what you need, it's easier to go out and buy. But yeah, a lot of moving parts with that question, Michelle.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to squeeze that in there since before I left you. Given the fact that you come from policy, I'm sure that you have seen a lot of things come across your desk about that. And I was like, I'm squeeze that
it's
in there.
Like historically, that's just a challenge. I mean, even standing up SAM.gov, that took years. I remember them trying to stand that up when I joined GAO, and that was 13, 14 years ago.
I remember testing the beta before it went live, because the feds were like, oh, you're a contractor, we don't have time to do this, will you test it? And I just remember being on the test call, and I'd be like, they'd be like, hey, it's supposed to do this. I'm like, it's not doing this, it's doing this. They're like, oh, well, it's supposed to do this. And I'm like, well, it's not.
Yeah, and then, let's run through GSA, right? So yeah, it's just, there's so many moving parts, and I think that's what's so fascinating about acquisitions. But the point of today's presentation was like how to get on a contract so you can, as a husband business,
sorry about that, guys,
provide the solution.
Well, I really appreciate it, Rebecca. This is actually extremely informative, and I know a lot of people will be watching the recording because you gave them a lot of really good tidbits in here. And I love this slide where you gave all the helpful links. Full disclosure, that's probably going to be up on our website later. I will clip that because that was actually extremely helpful. So I will clip that, and that will be a PR on our website here soon. So thank you. But without further ado, I will let you take us out if you want, because I now have you as the host. So I will see you guys later.
Yeah,
have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.